Welcome to the Odds Breakers, number one place for shared, sharp betting information.
All right, well, welcome back to podcast 74 of 2019. I'm your host, Kiev O'Neill. You can tweet us at the Odds Breakers. Follow me at OBKiev. And if you'd like to follow us on social media, please feel free to do that because we'll release some picks there as well. This episode is being brought to you by mybookie.ag. For a 50% sign-up bonus, please visit MyBookie and use the promo code The Odds Breakers. Terms and conditions apply. If you'd like to help us out with our costs, sponsor the website and the podcast, we'd love to help you out. Please visit theoddsbreakers.com, click shop, and become a member. For $17.99 a month, you can become a premium member and get my plays and premium plays before the line moves. For $2 more, you can have all that and become a patron subscriber and get the podcast a little bit early. And if nothing else, please visit theoddsbreakers.com and become a free picks newsletter subscriber. All right. Well, we have a jam-packed show for you today because Marco D'Angelo from Wager Talk is going to come on and talk all about how to bet college bowl games. And my, oh my, do we get into it. Then I'm going to get into some of my plays for the weekend. Now, obviously, the bowl games don't start until next week, so it's mostly going to be NFL focused. And after that, briefly talk about sharp money movement. So me and Marco talked for a long time, so let's get right into it. Here is Marco D'Angelo. And now I am very excited to welcome back one of the best and most respected handicappers in all of Las Vegas. You've heard from him many times and watched him on his show, Bet On It, and heard on the Wager Talk podcast. I'm pleased to welcome back Mr. Marco D'Angelo from WagerTalk.com. You can follow Marco on Twitter at Marco in Vegas. Marco, it's a busy time of year. How are you not going crazy?
Well, if you talk to my wife, she'll tell you I have gone crazy. And if you watched me last week watching the Saints 49ers game, that would confirm it because I was a raging lunatic yelling at Sean Payton during the game and just wanting to take over the reins on the sidelines. I could have got them home, but you know, let's just fake a punt on 4th and 18 from midfield.
It's, you wonder if it was Kirby Smart out there, right? Instead of Sean Payton. But, Kyle Shanahan got some injuries that game. He was able to get through. Kyle Shanahan just shocked the hell out of me this year, and this was the spot for Sean Payton to shine if he had it. But it's just crazy how the 49ers just keep coming, and you wonder if this team is just that well coached or if they are really that good. You know, this team's been blowing my mind for a while now. So it looks like they'll be most likely getting a first round bye, if not the best spot in the NFC. So everything's kind of ramping up now, isn't it?
It is. The bowl schedule just, announced a couple days ago. So, we're tearing that apart. And as you mentioned at the top of the show, I've got a new endeavor this year, which has taken up a lot of my time. And it's been worth it. It's helped me on both ends as far as being a little creative and being a producer on the new show, Bet On It, and it gets me digging deeper into games earlier in the week so we find value even quicker. And if you haven't watched Bet On It, this is going to be a shameless plug right now. I got to get one of them in. Check the show out. It's been fantastic. We have a college edition and an NFL edition, and it's an hour-long show. It's a ton of fun. You can check it out on our YouTube channel, and those go up every Wednesday evening. You can find those.
Fantastic. Yes. Wednesday evening, nice and early before some major line moves could happen. So definitely, I love the show. I love watching you guys and listening because, no matter how good someone thinks they are, there is just so much stuff out there that people miss. and watching the best do it is just literally a new perspective on things. So I do it when I'm out at the gym or out walking or doing whatever. A lot of long car rides for myself, and that's when I listen to podcasts and things like that too. So make sure you do that, because even the best handicappers, they're the ones that probably listen to the most podcasts, watch the most shows on YouTube, and just try to gather as much information quickly, because the amount of research it takes for you guys to make a show is a lot longer than the show itself. And when there's 3 or 4 people doing it, you are hearing from literally everyone that's already putting hours of work in. It's kind of like all put into one nice little package for you. So that's why I love it so much, Marco. And you guys do a fantastic job over there.
I appreciate that. And, most people then end it by saying, and Kelly's very easy on the eye.
That's very true as well, my man. Well, let's get right into some of this craziness going on in the month of December here. And we do have our bowl games out, and we have the spreads out and the matchups, and just so much to take in right now. I'm going to ask you a general question about this. What's different from handicapping bowl games in general over regular college football games?
Well, there's one word that I'm going to give you, and to me it's the biggest word when you get to this time of the year in handicapping bowl games, and it's motivation. You got to gauge it, and there's so many different things to look at that arise in the bowl games that are different than the regular season, and that's where we'll start with it.
Yeah. So motivation. How do you measure that though? Some people have asked that in the past, and it's a hard question. How do you measure a team's motivation in these situations?
Well, the first thing to do, and one thing you've got to understand, that with the bowl games, since we've gone to the playoff format, a lot of the other bowl games lost a lot of the luster. Before it was, just making it to a prestigious bowl game, that was the reward for your season. But now there's really only 4 teams that are getting totally rewarded, and those are the 4 that are battling for the national championship. I think somewhere down the road it's going to expand to 6 or 8, but for now we got what we've got. We got to make the best of it. But you've got to look at the teams when we get past those, 4 teams, the rest of them. Does the team want to be where they're at? Okay, and that's a general question. And, how do you know if the team wants to be where they're at? Well, if it was a team that was battling for going to the national championship, and I'm going to give you 2, perfect examples of those teams this year that you are going to want to circle and figure out the motivation for them, is Georgia and Utah. They both were right there. They both had their opportunities. Georgia wins, they're the number 4 team. Doesn't matter what Utah does, doesn't matter what Oklahoma does. Georgia loses. Utah was the first one to stub their toe. They played Friday night. Could have put the pressure on, Georgia even more with the win on Friday night against Oregon in the Pac-12 championship. And once again, the Pac-12 finally had a team ready to get themselves into the national playoff picture, and what happens? They cannibalize themselves. Oregon loses 2 weeks ago before they even get here, so they're out. And then what's Oregon do? They play spoiler and knock Utah out. So again, no Pac-12 team. But you got to question Georgia and Utah getting so close to getting to the national championship picture. How do they show up for the bowl game? And we saw last year Georgia was in a very similar situation, lost late in the season and didn't get to go. And it's total bubble burst, dream crusher game.
Right.
So that's the first thing that I look at. Then you look at the lesser teams. The teams that played interconference championship games, all right? Well, there's bowl scenarios where they're affiliated with a certain bowl. You win this conference, you go to this bowl, and so forth. You finish second, you go to a lesser bowl. You lose your conference championship, you're going to a lesser bowl. So there's a disappointment there of not going to the bigger bowl. So you got to look at these teams that maybe lost those conference championship games. Are they going to bounce back in the bowl, or are they going to mail it in? And the other one is look for teams that maybe started the season out slow. Maybe they didn't have a lot of starters coming back. So it was kind of a rebuilding year or a restocking year. And then you see that team catch fire the last 4 or 5 weeks of the season. As the season goes on and those young players start to get experience and mature, and they start to get the system down, they got total momentum heading into the bowls. Those are good teams to jump on in the bowls, because these teams, again, if they were young coming into this season, means they're going to be, veterans next year, and taking this momentum at the end of the season. And one of the other benefits of getting to a bowl game that people don't realize and put enough emphasis on is that when you get a bowl game, you're getting 15 extra practices that other teams are not getting. That's a leg up for next year. Everything's controlled. You can only start practices at a certain time. You can only have X number of practices during the off season and, spring ball and then summer ball and get ready for the season. When you throw in 15 extra practices at the end of the season where you're preparing for the bowl game, but you're also preparing for next year. That's a huge advantage to those teams, and I like to take those young teams that have that momentum at the end of the year because it's exciting for them. This is definitely a reward, and they're looking ahead to next year. And then the last one, if you want to look to try to find motivation, is look and see if this team was in a bowl game last year. What happened? Is the bowl game that they're in this year the same bowl game as they were last year? Because a lot of times with the conference affiliations, you finish in the same spot, you're going to be at the same bowl game. Is that really a reward going to the same place 2 years in a row? You like to see new things. So sometimes a repeat bowl entrant's not going to be as excited the second year. Did they win or lose their bowl game last year? If you lost a bowl game last year and you're in a bowl game this year, you're going to be a little bit more focused. You don't want to lose again. If you happen to be a team that laid a complete egg last year in a bowl game, got embarrassed, you're going to have total motivation this year because you don't want to have what happened last year. And you've got to watch during the week. You're going to get a lot of reports. Follow on Twitter, beat writers for certain teams, and see how things are going that week. You're going to see every year, it's going to happen to a few teams, a day or two before a bowl game, somebody's going to suspend 3 or 4 players because they broke curfew or, did something detrimental to the team and so forth. It happens all the time. A lot of times it is actually the reverse motivation is the rest of the team gets fired up. I used to swear every year back when Lou Holtz in his Arkansas days, he would suspend a player every year, I think, just to get the attention of his team. And, it does work. So there are different angles in subsets to look at these games to find motivation, Kiev.
That's a lot. Holy cow. Some of the stuff that you just mentioned is stuff that I forgot about or didn't even think about. That is a great answer right there. There's just so much into it. So there is a lot different when it comes to handicapping things, man. What you said earlier about, the playoffs, the last 4 or 5 years, whatever it's been, taking away from some of those other bowls. I think that's a true thing. I don't think that the public necessarily moves some of those small lines anymore, do they?
No, not like they used to. I mean, we're going to see the public opinions. Here in Vegas, we've got a new sheriff in town as far as sports books go. In a year, when they open up the granddaddy downtown, Circa, when that casino is done, the new casino, and you see that new sports book, it's going to put everybody else in second place here in Vegas. They're already making a splash. What they have been all season long, the first sports book to bring out numbers on Sundays for the following week in college football. That's huge. Somebody taking a stance and actually taking wagers. Now, granted, it's a two-way street. They get to come out with the numbers first, so it's getting them a lot of publicity. But what it also does is you're getting all of the sharps hanging out at Circa on Sunday afternoon waiting for those numbers to come out so that they can pounce on them. Well, Circa's not dumb. They'll put the numbers out, but they do put limits on it. They'll take a $1,000 bet or a $2,000 bet at a bad number to from a sharp to get to the right number. And it's, I don't know why more sports books, don't do that. Are they worried about, losing some $1,000 bets at the beginning? I would rather, that's what it always blew my mind, where books would, kick out sharp players. Why do you want to kick out the guys that can tell you where you made the mistakes? I would rather eat a small, dose of crow than to have a wrong number out there and have, the masses attack that number before you can get off of it when the limits are bigger. So, kudos to Circa and what they're doing, and they're setting a standard here in Vegas. I know that with sports books popping up all over the country as states legalize, right now Nevada, who's been the leader forever because it was the only place you could really bet, is now falling way behind in technology and in books that, I hate to use the word or get a backbone. I was going to go for a different body part, but we'll go with backbone to do it, Kiev. New Jersey right now, I think, has the best offerings as far for the bettors. Now, we are seeing some crazy things with a difference in juice and, what they're taking on Vigs and sometimes, so they're making up for it in other areas. But the board that they're putting out of what you can bet and different props and everything else, New Jersey right now is way ahead of Vegas.
That's crazy, and they better get their act together. I think that whole thing about kicking sharp bettors should be obviously illegal, in my opinion. I think it's a point of segregation. You're going to put yourself out there and be a sports book and just say I can only make money off people that are don't put time into things and stuff like that. I don't even know why that even flies nowadays, and I think that's something that might be a standard in the future. I don't know what your thoughts about that are, but I would think that if the federal government's going to get involved, they're going to have a standard like that. Does that make any sense?
It does make sense, and if you did get national regulation on something, then maybe you could get that. But as long as it's up to the individual jurisdictions to have their own governing parties, like here we have the Nevada Gaming Commission, that anytime you try to do something different, you have to get approval from them to do things. They don't enforce it, and I agree with you. If you are taking an application for taking bets, then by God, you need to take bets. And you shouldn't segregate people. And I love the thing of one of the things that's going to get somebody thrown out the quickest is they look at what number you're betting at and what the number's closing at. And anybody that's beating the closing number on a consistent basis, they're going to be deemed sharp. Well, okay, so we're sharp because you're not. If you put up a bad number and I take advantage of it, why am I being penalized for you being incompetent? That's the part I don't, that I don't agree with. And we'll see what happens if, Nevada didn't have to worry about it because there was no competition. As competition continues to, happen and people compete for those dollars, we'll see if there will be changes with the regulation. I'm not against, if you got somebody that's beating you up, then, if you want to put them on a limit, put them on a limit, okay? But don't shut them out.
Yeah.
Make it a reasonable limit, but, don't shut them out.
Yeah, absolutely. And that I think that's hopefully going to come into fruition here, so we'll definitely see if any changes come. One thing I look at is when it comes to the motivation, you covered that extremely well. There's a travel a little bit too. Some of these teams, like you said, do have home games, and will they be motivated because of that? If it's a bad bowl, they wouldn't. And I also remember that line from Wall Street, and I've actually fell into this predicament before. The pigs get fat and the hogs get slaughtered. Sometimes you look for a number and it's good. But you think it might get better, and then, it goes from 3 to 2.5, and you're like, well, this thing might go down to 2, 1.5, down to pick them. All of a sudden, it's back to 3. I think that's going to happen more often than not on some of these smaller games because you're not getting that public influence, and there's sharper people like yourself betting into them. So my only advice, if you like a number, probably fire at it because chances are there's other sharp people that like that number as well. Right, Marco?
There is, and there's two times to bet the bowl, when you're going to bet the bowl games. When the numbers first come out, all of the pros are doing the same thing. We're tearing the games apart as fast as we can and try to get to the window and get the best numbers. So the sharps are there betting now. So you're going to see movement on the lines. What's going to happen, though, we're talking some of the first games are on the 20th or 21st, and then, they go New Year's Day and everything. So you're talking 3 weeks out with some of these games. You're not going to see that second wave of betting after the initial buy from the sharps until you get closer to the game, because that's when John Q. Public bets. Think about it, Kiev. Most people that are betting one of two ways. They're either betting legally, where they got to walk up to the window, put their money down, and make their bet. Most people that are casual bettors, their bankrolls are not such that they can tie up their money for 3 weeks. Okay, they're going to wait till the day of the game or the day before the game to make their bet, because they need their money to bet all of those other days leading up to that day. So they're not worried about getting that best number right now with, a huge bankroll. Or if they're betting offshore and they don't have a credit account, they're doing an account where they got to post up first, well, then they've got limited funds in their account, and they can only bet what's in their account. Well, if you tie up 10 bets on bowl games 3 weeks from now, you might have just tied up your whole bankroll, and you can't play your games on a day-to-day basis. So that's why the public is always going to get to the window on game day, and that's where you're going to see the most dramatic moves. Now, if you're sharp enough to understand where the market's going to go, where you think it's going to go, then you have the decision, do I bet early because the market's going to go against me, or do I wait till late and bet once the public gets involved and gets me a better number? Generally speaking, here it's 2 rules of thumb. If you like an over, bet it right away. Unless there's weather conditions, generally that total is going to continue to get bet up closer to game day, especially when you're talking about primetime games like a Thursday night game, a Sunday night game, or a Monday night NFL game. The public gets in there and starts firing away closer to game time, and we know the public doesn't bet unders, okay? They bet overs. So you're going to get the best number on the over earlier in the week. If you're going to bet the under, then you do the opposite and you wait till game day and pretty close to kickoff where you can get that best number at its peak, but then you also got to play the old game. You made a Wall Street reference. You got to get to the window before the other sharp that's doing the same thing that you're doing, waiting for the peak. Yeah. You got to beat him to the number. So it's a fun game. When we're talking favorites and dogs, same philosophy. If you're going to bet a favorite, you're better off betting them earlier in the week because the public's generally going to migrate to betting favorites. If you're betting the dog in the game, wait till later in the week, let the public drive that line to its highest point, and then you jump in and grab your dog.
That's some great advice, Marco. If you like the over and if you like the favorites, bet them early. And if you like the dog and you like the under, bet it late in general. Obviously, look at the weather, but that is a great general rule, one that's going to make you money if you follow it properly. That's fantastic. The last thing I'm going to say is that conference play is the last thing I look at. Sometimes the strength of conference does factor into my handicap, and when it comes to bowl games, Sagarin does a great job in measuring some of these strength of schedules. So remember that, my friends. Next,
one other tip there, too. If you can get the better defense and you're getting points in a bowl game, that's always a good starting point.
Absolutely. The defense will show up everywhere, including bowl games. Offenses do not always show up. Great advice there. So who's a team that didn't quite make a bowl game, Marco, that may be a team to be on next year? And I have one for you, maybe 1.5, but I'd like to hear what your thoughts on that is.
Yeah, this is something that I like to look at more when we do March Madness, because in March Madness, there are so many teams that get left out. I mean, they have winning records. They make their case. They think they should be part of the 64, and they're not. Then they end up in the NIT or one of the other alphabet tournaments at the end of the college basketball season. In football, it's a little bit different because To become bowl eligible, you have to win 6 games. If you win 6 games, you're bowl eligible. Well, this year, there were 79 teams that were bowl eligible that had 6 wins or more. The only problem this year is there were only 78 bowl spots. So one of those 6-6 teams got left out. And the team that got left out was Toledo. And generally speaking, if it's a 6-6 team and somebody has to be left out, it's either going to be a MAC conference team or a Mountain West conference team, because the conferences are not a Power 5, obviously, and they're deemed as the lesser of the evils. They gotta take somebody out. And I think last year it might have been Wyoming got snubbed, and this year you got Toledo. But is it a motivating fact to move forward for next year? Or if it was in March Madness, is that something we ride with them in the NIT because they got something to prove? Not really, but one thing they do have, and it's up to the coaching staff to decide, if they are 6-6 and didn't get to go to a bowl, they do have the opportunity that they can have those extra practices until the first bowl game is played. So it is something that a team can take advantage of and try to make lemonade out of lemons to do, and that's something that, to be honest with you, I didn't even know that rule was in effect. Our good friend Ralph Michaels is the one that enlightened me on that 6-6 teams that don't get to go to a bowl have the option of having those extra practices.
I didn't know that either. That is some great information. Didn't know. So that helps the coach out a little bit on his path to next year. No, that's
absolutely.
That's fantastic. Yeah. So the team that I thought made a great run, they're a 5-win team, was West Virginia. And I got to tell you, I bet their under team went total at 5, and they tied that thing. And I thought it was my sharpest bet before the season. I love what Neil Brown did over there and how hard they fought. They only returned 7 starters, as you mentioned, I believe, on our preseason podcast. And they had this Big 12 conference and was able to win 5 games, but it's the way they finished. And they took TCU out of bowl contention at the end. This was a spot they weren't supposed to be motivated. Their season was over. TCU had everything to do to win. And West Virginia goes in and just beats them, takes them out as well. I like that about West Virginia. And so that's one team I'm going to have my eye on coming in for next year as possibly an ATS darling for the first couple games. The other one is one that everyone's been on these last 2 years and gotten their ass kicked. Well, everyone that we talk about, me and you weren't on it, but no.
I have a wild guess where you're going with it. Is it in the Big Ten?
Yes, it is. Man.
Yeah, is it in the Midwest of the Big Ten? And all they have is corn out there, Nebraska.
That's a fantastic guess. Fantastic. And I'll tell you, and this is the time where no one's going to be on him, because now they think that Scott Frost, they lost the money and he's not all he's supposed to be. I don't think so. I'm going to see how their defense looks first, Marco, but I call them the poor man's Ohio State with the way they run their plays, and they have some speed over there. And these kids getting older now, you got to his recruits a little bit. I think if their defense can just make that next step, they could be really good. And looking at I have to look at their schedule, but this could be a team that I'm finally going to be on when nobody's going to be on. So I'm going to keep my eye open for that. They really fought Iowa hard and only lost that game by 3 points right before the season, or right before the bowl season here. So I was pretty proud of what they did, and I think Scott Frost can be a very dangerous coach. The only problem is the Big Ten West. They're a bunch of pretty good teams there. If you're looking at what's Minnesota's been doing, PJ Fleck, and Wisconsin's always there. So yeah, they got some competition there, but they might be able to take the next step. So I'm looking at those guys.
You say the next, the defense has to take the next step. The defense has to take about 10 steps, okay? The defense was absolutely putrid this year, and I think he's such an offensive-minded coach that he was so geared at trying to get his recruits to run his offense that the defense just didn't didn't get the attention that it needed, and I think that's got to be the priority, and they got to cut the turnovers down. Adrian Martinez, loads and loads of talent as a quarterback, but man, he turns the football over way too often. Reminds me too much of Jameis Winston, where he can give you the old 3-and-3 stat line, 3 touchdown passes and 3 interceptions. That's always going to put you in a bad spot. And I think that that was a problem this year. Obviously, the turnovers as it was last year. Clean that up, get the defense going in the right direction. And as you said, it is year 3. Most of the players that will be on the field will be players that were actually recruited by him. So now we get to see what he needs to do.
Absolutely, and I wonder if that QB is going to be under competition with Luke McCaffrey sitting over there as a freshman. I liked what I seen out of him. He's got a very good bloodline, as we all know. I think that there could be a chance you might not even see Adrian Martinez as starting. So that's another interesting thing.
Which, if you go back to the beginning of the season, Adrian Martinez was in talk for the Heisman.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, he was.
He was one of the longer shots, but he was one of the sexy picks. As we all know who the favorites are. Who's somebody that you might give a look to? And Adrian Martinez was a guy that got some money.
Yeah, he got a ton of money coming in just because of that Nebraska and Scott Frost hype. Now, that's over with now, and he's capable. He's just not as good as Mackenzie Milton was at Central Florida. Mackenzie Milton was awesome. That injury was devastating. He got about 14, 15 months ago now. I really hope that kid bounces back because he was amazing for that school. So
he was, but they also it was a plug and play system though there at Central Florida, where when Milton went out, and I'm slipping on the backup, but he came in and played just as well. Yes.
Yeah, he played pretty well. Yeah, he did too.
And if you remember when Martinez got hurt this year, they brought in, which I thought was a great move. They brought in a Central Florida transfer. I think his name was Verdell, and he actually played well the 2 games that he backed up Martinez. It's just the defense again, crapped the bed. They scored on a couple, opening drives. They went right down the field back to back. I remember the Indiana game was one of the ones that I was on Nebraska, and they scored the first 2 times they had the ball, missed the extra point on the second touchdown, and was driving for their third, and then threw an interception, inside the 20 that they took back and set up on a short field for a touchdown. And instead of going up, possibly 20-0, they end up, giving up a touchdown and changed the whole momentum of that Indiana game. And then he got knocked out of the game, and we were down to the 3rd-string quarterback in that game. So it was a lot of bad things that happened to Nebraska this year that you think just a clean year is going to find them 2 or 3 more wins.
I agree, and I think they're going to be in the bowls next year if that defense, like you said, 10 steps, they can just take a couple here. They might be a team to be on. All right, well, let's get right into the college football bowl game, starting with the playoffs here. Might as well just talk a little bit about it. Do you have any initial thoughts on the spreads and the playoff teams here, or anything on the totals here? Have you got a chance to look at it?
Yeah, I looked at them, and obviously, and we talked about Circa, being the first out. Circa opened LSU at 11, and we're here right away at 13. Now, again, public perception is on LSU. Don't get me wrong, because, they look the most impressive. Everybody, Ohio State, even though they've done nothing wrong all year, they have a game at the end there against Wisconsin. They had to come from behind. My God, they just played Penn State 3 weeks ago in a game for all the marbles at that time. They win that. Then they play Michigan, their arch rival. Again, it wouldn't have cost them, the Big Ten title game, but, it would have put a definite hurt on them for where they were going to be seated and so forth. They show up and beat the snot out of Michigan in Michigan, and then they play, the Big Ten championship game, which was actually, even though it was the championship game, was like a letdown because they already beat Wisconsin earlier in the year. So they are getting Ohio State public perception has gone down while LSU's public perception has gone up because they throttled a Georgia team. And, when we did the Bet On It show, we broke down the big TV games from last week, and obviously that was, one of the premier games. And I said, everybody's going to talk about that Georgia defense and, how much better it is than LSU, this and that. And the thing that I pointed out, the difference because Georgia's defensive numbers were better on paper than LSU's was the fact Georgia can't score. Okay? That's a team that I had went like 6 straight games until the Georgia Tech game where they scored 27 points or less. If you're only putting up 27 points on the board, your defense has to play 4 quarters every game, and they got to play to the tilt. They're not going with prevent defenses because you don't have that big of a lead. LSU's defense, was a few notches down from Georgia's, but if you look at all of their games, because their offense was so efficient, they had 30-point leads in all of their games, and they're making substitutions or going into prevent defenses in the fourth quarter where you're trading yards for clock time, and it made their defensive numbers look not as good as Georgia's on paper. And I said, you'll see it on Saturday when these two play, and how does Georgia trade points with LSU? But right now, the market on LSU to jump from 11 to 13, the Sharps are doing it, and we haven't even gotten the public involved because they're not tying up their money for 3 weeks, as I said. When they get to the party, they'll probably get this number to 14. So my advice to you is if you like LSU, get it before it gets to 14. If you like Oklahoma and want to play the disrespected card, I would wait until this number peaks and go from there. What surprised me the most is to have a playoff game like this. These are supposed to be the top 4 teams in the country, and we've got a total of 76.5 in this game. And they can get there. I mean, the Oklahoma defense can get shredded. And Baylor played them, right down to the wire, had to go to overtime. Now, obviously, it became a low-scoring game in the Oklahoma-Baylor game. Baylor was down to their third-string quarterback, okay? And Baylor has a good defense, so they did slow them down. LSU's got a good defense, but Oklahoma's going to get some points. I just don't know how Oklahoma stops LSU. And at what point does Ed Orgeron take his foot off the gas, knowing he's got another game to deal with, not risk injury and everything else. In a lot of the games during the regular season, they didn't pull Joe Burrow because they were, they wanted to get an LSU quarterback as the Heisman. Did you ever think you'd hear those words? First of all, a player from LSU winning the Heisman. I think there's only been one other one. But for that person to be at the quarterback position, LSU quarterback is where you went to die. That was not a premier spot. We had so many guys that came in with, big stats and, great resumes from high school and 5-star recruits and everything else, and nobody ever panned out as a top flight quarterback from LSU. That was always their Achilles heel, and now we're looking at the Heisman Trophy winner, in my opinion. So
absolutely,
this is a spot.
No, I know. I agree 100%. Just real quick, if I interject, look at Jarvis Landry and Odell Beckham. They played for LSU, and you never even know it. So.
Absolutely. And in the second game, Kiev, as I said, the public sentiment, for whatever reason, is down on Ohio State because all they did was win and just didn't win the last game impressively, and the stock couldn't be any higher on Clemson right now. Clemson's mowing over everybody. Dabo Swinney's been in the media, chirping about, his team's not getting any respect and they're taking care of business. Well, of all the Power 5 conferences, the ACC is the worst, okay? There is Clemson at the top, and then there's a bunch of mediocre teams, all hovering around there. You had Virginia Tech battle to the last week of the season to get in there, and that was only after, Pitt peed down their legs in the final 2 weeks of the season to screw themselves out of going to the ACC championship game. It didn't matter who was going to go. It was going to be a slaughter, and it was going to be a spot where Clemson didn't take their foot off the gas. Why? It wasn't going to do them any good because it was going to be the same result. They were either going to be the number 2 or the number 3. They weren't leapfrogging 2 spots, and most likely they weren't going to leapfrog out of 3. But even if they went to 2, it's the same deal. You're going to play the same team. 2 plays 3. So for Clemson, they might be a tad overrated at this point. You got to Ryan Day, the job he's done. For me, that's who's going to win Coach of the Year. My personal pick, if I had the vote, given the talent that he had and what he accomplished this year in the program, it would be Matt Rule for Baylor, would be my vote for Coach of the Year. But it'll go to Ohio State just because of what they've done. And when you follow a legend, and Kiev, we've seen it in a lot of programs, okay? You're the first guy in the door after a living legend has coached there forever or for a very long time and had, the success that Urban Meyer had in his tenure there. It's tough to follow it, Look at Justin Fuentes at Virginia Tech following Frank Beamer. You can go on and on with, these coaches and, when they leave the program and so forth. This is, you got to give him credit for what they've done. And I think Ohio State is a team that's actually, they've had a little bit of a chip on their shoulder all year because coming into the season, they were ranked, but nobody put them where they ended up. They thought that this would be a drop-off, losing Urban Meyer, losing your starting quarterback to the NFL and everything else. Tremendous job that they've done, and I think they want to prove that it wasn't just the coach. So we'll see how that goes, and I think that this line is going to continue to head the way that it is from Clemson 1 to 2, that, might creep to 2.5. I don't think you get solid 3s because the minute it hits 3s, you're going to see the sharps grabbing the Ohio State in 3s. It'll be one of those that'll ping pong back and forth. 2.5 juice, maybe a 3, even money, -3 plus 120 on the 3, things like that. But I just don't see it going more than that.
Yeah, absolutely. So lot there, and I agree. Ohio State, Michigan was favored over Ohio State before the season started. So, fantastic. And, then they're a 13-point favorite, and then Michigan looked good, and Ohio State looked just okay against Penn State, only winning by 12. So then it goes to 9.
And there was two turnovers that were quick scores that made it look closer than it was. I mean, this team went through a whole stretch of had to play tough team after tough team to keep that undefeated season going. And I just I think if there was ever of the 4 teams that are in the national championship, if there was a team that needed a month off, it was Ohio State. Oklahoma had a lot of tough games too, but Oklahoma's used to that because they've had no defense forever. You go back to last year, it was just Oklahoma having to outscore everybody, and at the end of the season, that defense played like the 2018 version, and that's what they were having to do in games against Iowa State and the couple battles against Baylor and so forth. So, and then Oklahoma State in the season finale. So I think Ohio State and Oklahoma will benefit from the time off. If you're Clemson and LSU, I think it's, the time off could be the worst thing for you because it broke your momentum. You guys were clicking on all cylinders the whole way down the last 6 weeks of the season.
Right, absolutely. They did. Ohio State was unstoppable, but it's just a strange line here. Seeing Clemson favored and everybody's in their mom's power ratings, Ohio State was number 1. You even look at ESPN's FPI, which is slights towards the SEC. They have Ohio State as a number 1 by a couple points at least, and Clemson's favored here. Something's really fishy with that line, in my opinion. It's very strange, and I wonder if it has to do with the fact that they're leaving the Big Ten. I don't know. They're going to be now on a neutral field against another powerful school here. Maybe it's the fact that Trevor Lawrence has an extra gear. There's just a lot of things, and you can speculate. But I wanted to bet Ohio State, and now that it's just so strange that they're not favorite, I find it strange myself. And the other game I have it at 13 on my power ratings. That's the exact number I have LSU over Oklahoma. Here's the problem that I could have, and I'm not saying I'm not going to not bet LSU. Oklahoma, it hasn't been a dog, you know. What's Jalen Hurts been? Mr. Disrespected his whole career. He came from Alabama. Now he's in the playoffs, and now he's a dog. I'm always scared about going against somebody that's been this disrespected, especially looking at this line. You could possibly see an out of his mind Jalen Hurts throwing the ball way above his ability, happening to just thread the needle every single time to guys like CD Lamb and things like that, right? So that goes back to the total of 76.5. Why we are seeing such a big number, because there's two things here. LSU hasn't seen an offense as diverse as Oklahoma's. And on the flip side to that, as bad as Oklahoma's defense has been all year, that's against the run and shoots and the fast-paced finesse offenses of the Big 12. LSU can beat you both ways. They can pound the ball down your throat. They can throw it over the top. They haven't seen an offense as complete as LSU's or as physical as LSU's. I don't know that, a fun prop would be is somebody put up a number of LSU punts in the game. I don't think there's going to be a lot. I'm going to go with, I'm going to put 2.5 is the over-under on that one.
And I would probably be betting the under.
Yeah, right. That'd be an awesome prop. That's a great idea. No, that's a high total, but it's there for a reason. And that LSU turns up the tempo and they slow it down at the end usually because they're blowing people out. So, like you said, trading yards for clock. It's just the way that LSU can do it. They can do it either way, and Oklahoma's going to run and gun, and what an exciting game that's going to be. Both these matches are amazing. In my opinion, there's three teams that are all pretty equal, and it's Ohio State, LSU, and Clemson, man. And if you could like change the number of playoff teams, maybe it would be three teams this year. I don't know how you'd do that. It'd probably be unfair to give one a bye. But they are just looking at the 13-point spread. You can just tell that they are the best three teams. But hey, at least we're not in the BCS era when there was only two teams, right, Marco?
This is true. But you know what? No matter how many teams you get, whether it's 4, 6, 8, there's always going to be that one right behind where they draw the line that's going to be sharpened.
Absolutely.
It's always going to be that way.
All right, my man. Well, we got about 50 minutes to cover these games, so let's get right into it. We're going to touch on just a couple early games for you guys in the bowls and then touch on some NFL Week 15 here. Makers Wanted Bahamas Bowl is the first one on December 20th. We have Buffalo versus Charlotte. Charlotte's about plus 5.5. Over under is 57. Have you looked at this one, Marco?
Yeah, a couple quick notes on this one. Both were teams in this one that you would classify as those young teams that peaked in the second half of the season. So both have a head of steam coming here and momentum. The difference for me in this game, I would generally look to the dog in earlier bowls, but Buffalo has, and it surprised me, I had to double-check this number. They have the 21st defense, allowing just 4.9 yards per play. 21st, and this is a MAC team. Okay, most teams in the MAC can't even spell defense, let alone play it. And this is a spot where they're 21st, where Charlotte's 99th defensively, yards per play. I think Buffalo wears Charlotte down in this one. I'll go ahead and lay it with Buffalo 35-24.
I'm glad you said that because I think I'm heading your direction. This is a typical running team versus passing team kind of matchup, I think. Buffalo runs and can stop the run, though. Charlotte also is 5 yards per carry. But to be honest with you, looking at the Conference USA, they're bad at the bottom 50% of these teams, really bad, right, in my opinion. I almost would argue that maybe Conference USA, except for FAU and a couple teams, is as bad as the MAC. And lots of people are fading the MAC teams. And I think that's why this spread might be a little bit wrong here. I think that Buffalo should be a little bit higher. I think it's about 7 on my power ratings. Buffalo does have a 0.3 net yards per play advantage here. And my only problem is these kids are going to behave themselves in the Bahamas, right?
Yeah, you got two schools that definitely should be having some fun there. I know getting out of Buffalo in December to go to the Bahamas, that probably would classify as a little bit of the bigger party. I would definitely say that.
Yeah. I'd probably show up at Buffalo's party over Charlotte's, but either way, I like Buffalo, and I like Lance Leopold, their coach over there too. So I have it as a strong lean right now, but I think you might have talked me over here. So liking the 5.5, and I don't think you're going to get much of a better line than that. So lay it with Buffalo in complete agreement. Let's move on to the Tropical Smoothie Cafe Frisco Bowl. What a mouthful that is. No pun intended there. Utah State versus Kent State, plus 9.5. I think it's actually down to 8 now. This thing's been bouncing a little bit. Over-unders at 65. What's your thoughts on this one?
Yeah, you look and you talk about motivation, and the motivation's got to be a question mark with Utah State. Coming into the season, Kiev, this was one of those sexy picks to win the Mountain West this year because there was so much, and excuse the pun, love for QB love for Utah State, and it just never materialized. Now, what did happen is they had a very tough out-of-conference schedule. So their win-loss record doesn't look that great. But they were in a position in the Mountain West Conference that it came down, they were playing Boise State, and the winner was going to control their own destiny for the Mountain West Conference championship, and they got the snot beat out of them by Boise. So they were that close to going to the bigger bowl. So you got to worry about them, and generally big favorites in these early bowls generally are not good because it is a motivational thing. If you're in a bowl this early, okay, you're either a team that's not that good or you're a team that was expected to be good and you had a bad season. And in this case, that's Utah State. They were expected to be good, didn't have the season that they had hoped for, and now they're in the Tropical Smoothie Bowl. So I have to look at Kent State, and Kent State is a team that is a little bit misleading themselves with their season record. They got off to a horrible start, but if you looked at what they played at the beginning of the season, 5 of their first 7 games were on the road. They should have punched the athletic director that signed the deal for that schedule this year. 5 of 7 on the road to start, and 3 of those 5 road games, you were at Arizona State, at Auburn, and at Wisconsin. Are you nuts?
And they made a bowl game, Marco. That's the crazy part.
They made a bowl game. So is this a team that's excited to be in a bowl game? Absolutely. I got to look at the points. I think Utah State is the better team overall, but I see this as under a touchdown final. I have it 41-35. Going to have some points here, but I'll lean to Kent State plus the points.
My man, I have to agree with you. Kent State never makes bowl games. I think this is their 3rd of all time. Yeah, I'm proud of these guys because they made me some money from some plays before the season. It was over 4 at plus 160. And some plays of mine during the season, too. So I love this team. My power ratings have this at 8.5, right? But as you said, why is Utah State motivated? This was a down year for them. They got a new coach in Gary Anderson, which we don't have to get into how much I dislike Gary Anderson being when he was on the Badgers for a little while and how he left us. But it's just this team in Kent State, I think they're going to come out just excited, just extremely excited to be here. Utah State downgrades themselves a little bit, and they're going to Texas. They're going to Dallas, pretty much. I don't know how you can be that motivated if you're them. This is a bad spot, in my opinion, for Utah State. Now, I did not bet Kent State because I'm going to wait till this is more faded. I think that you have a shot at getting 10 again. 10. I think it was at 9.5. It's down to 8.5-ish. I think you have a shot at 10. So I am completely on your side on this one, man. Let's move on to December 21st. We have the Mitsubishi Motors Las Vegas Bowl that Marco's going to go to. Right, Marco?
I will go to next year's when it's at the new stadium. This is my last chance to see Sam Boyd Stadium. I've been in Vegas 11 years and I have not gone to the stadium yet.
You're kidding me. I've been there, man, and I've obviously lived very close, but Badgers played UNLV there a couple times. I've actually showed up there. Make sure you BYU.
You're the guy that pulled the plug, right?
No. We talked about them. I was you, Marco. You had your axe out there, but and that was the game before. I wasn't at that game. I wish I was. That would have been exciting. Yeah. But either way, this Sam Boyd Stadium's definitely a place. If you have to go in the summer to watch a game you never want to see again. So what I found really strange is poor Chris Peterson has to play his old team in his last game at Washington. He's got to play Boise State. What a spot that is.
Normally, Kiev, I would be all over the dog here because where is the motivation for a team, Washington, that coming in had aspirations of winning the Pac-12 and, maybe playing for a national championship. Okay, national championship gone right away. Playing for the Pac-12 championship was there until they lost that game against Oregon, and then, it was just, they lost a couple close games, then they had some inexcusable games. The wheels fell off this Washington team this year. So you got to say, why are they going to be motivated to be playing here in Las Vegas? Where for Boise, although this is one of those ones where they end up here all the time, it is where you go. This is you win your conference, this is your prize. Mm-hmm. It is what it is. But you threw the thing in at the end. Do we play the win one for the Gipper here with Peterson on his way out the door at Washington? Do the players come to play to send him off a winner? Because, let's face it, Boise State beat up on a soft conference. Mm-hmm. Pure and simple. The Mountain West had a couple teams in it, and they were several notches below Boise State. We had the championship game. They were a 2-touchdown favorite. Okay? They're going to get out physical here with Washington in their defense if we get the full effort from Washington, and that is what you're trying to do here. Strength of schedule is all Washington in this one. They've got the better defense. They got all of that, but you've got to worry, do they show up? If they do, I think they can handle Boise State rather easily.
Maybe a live bet scenario, see how that first quarter does go, because a similar team like BYU, Washington handled them pretty simply, and they were motivated that game. So we'll see what happens on this one. Completely agree with your assessment there. I really have nothing to add on this one. Let's go into the final bowl. We're going to talk about the R&L Carriers New Orleans Bowl. We have Appalachian State versus UAB. UAB is about a 16.5 dog I'm seeing. It's been bouncing between 17 and 16.5 from where I see it. Over-under is at 48. It's talking about strength of schedule. UAB, I don't even think they played one Power 5 team in Tennessee, and that's about it. What are your thoughts on this, baby?
Well, motivation-wise, App State, they're where they needed to be. They won their conference championship game. They're rolling. They're happy. UAB lost their conference championship game, and they lost it bad. Florida Atlantic pounded them 49-6. So you would think that losing that bad would have them motivated for a good showing. I'm also baffled at the fact, and you said it's because of the strength of schedule, that UAB is a 16.5, 17-point underdog on what is relatively a low total for college football. We're looking at a 48, and you've got a point spread of 16.5. That's a lot of points for a low total. So given the situation and being an early bowl, and one of the other factors that you've got to worry about, especially with teams that haven't been to a bowl game, okay, and that if App State does get a big lead, you saw last week where Louisiana Tech made a furious run at them late. Does App State, take some starters out in the fourth quarter to get players in, the old empty the bench, get everybody's name, in the official, box score and everything, and you leave back doors open, with a big number like that? This is a game for me that I most likely will be passing, but if I was playing it, I would be looking to the underdog just because it's just so many points for a bowl game, especially one of these early ones.
And I guess there's a couple ways to look at it. Is the total too short here because of the huge spread? App State puts up points. They really do. And Tennessee put up some pretty easy points against UAB because they can pass. And I know Appalachian State can pass the ball here. Maybe you look at the over. That's one thing. If you think Appalachian State's going to let them score at the end, and that's what I'm worried about on the side. I like Appalachian State on the side, but looking at the total, and I can't really trust them in the second half. It was kind of like that Lafayette game. I can see them playing all of their players in this bowl game to give every kid this experience if they're up by 20, 23 points. And you know what happens? They give up a TD and they give up a field goal, and then all of a sudden the spread's not covered, right?
The best scenario for you is for them to be up like 24-0 and tossing a shutout. That there's just that thing about when you have a shutout, the longer you're tossing that shutout, the harder you're trying to maintain the shutout, and then you don't trade yards, for clock. That's the only thing. But I just don't see their defense being, solid to be in a position like that. I know I would have no money on under 48. I can guarantee you that. Even if you said you gave me free money and said, here, bet the under, you win, you get to keep it. You loses, don't worry about it. I still couldn't do it.
You could even bet it with your money, Marco says. Listen to that. Well, I tell you, I think there is the only way I could play this game is to bet the first half. I think that possibly there's a chance that App State jumps them the first half here, and I just like the high power that they have. I think their plays per game is a little bit skewed because if you look at what they've done, but minus that one loss against Georgia Southern, they go to the SEC, they beat them. They beat South Carolina. They go to North Carolina, they beat them. They've been blowing out teams in the Sun Belt, and I just think that they're that powerful. So you're looking at probably a -9 first half is what I'm thinking here at 16.5 if it stays around there, -9, 9.5. So I would lay that.
How about if you can get a team total on App State?
Yeah, team total. Yep, team total with looking at 48 points. That's going to be low too. Team total, what, 30 points, maybe 20. It's got to be. They're going to score that, in my opinion, especially in a bowl game here. The kids are motivated here, I think. The question I have is, App State's such a good team. I kind of wish they had a better bowl game and a better opponent, And there's that team that's always high on my power ratings that doesn't get to play a Power 5 team. Do you think that affects the kids at all?
No, because, when you're at this point, you're going to be a standalone game or one or two games, that you're competing with at that time at the most. They're going to get a national stage. So that's another reason why I would love when you get closer to game day, if we get some of these books put up, the team totals, and take a look at that, because this is one of those ones where the points are going to come from one team in this game. And that's App State, and they've got a lot of firepower. And if they do get out to that big lead, this is a spot where you could just see UAB, just quitting. That could happen as well.
Right.
And then you just, and if you're running the football and you're running it well, you can still score. This team can beat you both passing and throwing the football. Obviously, they got a very potent passing game, but this is a team that can. as you said, the strength of schedule difference is so much that they should be able to run the football down the throats and continue to score.
Absolutely, 100% agree here. All right, let's get to the NFL and get through that. And the New York Jets versus the Baltimore Ravens is a Thursday night showdown. The Ravens are laying about 14.5-ish, maybe about 14.3. I'm looking at some of these lines. It's going down a little bit towards 14. Over and under is 45. Man, the Ravens, amazing team, possibly number one now that the Patriots lost the game in most power rankings. The Jets are in the bottom next to Miami. So have you got a chance to look at this discrepancy here?
Oh, it is a big discrepancy, but here's the equalizer. As bad as the Jets are, this is a game that's going to be played on a short week. Baltimore is coming off a series of big games. They played Houston, the Rams, San Francisco, and then Buffalo in back-to-back-to-back weeks. And now they got to play a short week, and then they got their two division rivals, Cleveland and Pittsburgh, to finish out the season. You've got your starting quarterback, who is everything to this team. He's a little bit banged up. He got hit pretty hard last week. He was limited in practice on Monday. He's playing on a short week. How many times do you want him running the football and taking shots when your body only had, 3 days recovery time, and you played a very physical Buffalo Bill team last week? Baltimore, all they got to do is win and move on. They don't need style points. They don't need anything else. They just need to win to continue to get home field advantage. And as for all of the bad stats that I can reel off about the Jets' offense, do you realize the Jets have the number 3 defense in football at yards per play? They're allowing just 5.1 yards per play. Number 3 in the NFL. Number 1 against stopping the run. They only allow 3.0 yards per play on the ground. And we all know Baltimore, it starts with the running game. That sets everything else up. I think the Jets have a good chance to cover this game on Thursday night. I'll take the Jets plus the points. Baltimore wins. Don't get excited. They're not going to lose, but they have no reason to win by 3 touchdowns.
Oh, man. Well, geez, I lean the other way, and maybe I'm wrong here, but either way, I don't think we've ever been disagreement either. Look at that, Marco. Look at I looked at what you said there about the rushing yards, and that's the thing that scares me because Baltimore is a rushing team, but Baltimore also, it's Lamar Jackson's his threat of running. They got like 3 backs that can run the ball extremely well. It's all starting with Ingram, and I tell you, man, I haven't seen an offensive firepower like this with an accurate quarterback ever. Maybe RG3 was kind of that his first year, but I mean, he runs fast. He can whip the ball. He's tall. Russell Wilson was that for a little bit, but look at how good he's been. I don't like laying huge chalk either, and I don't think I would do it at 14.5. It would have to be 14 for me. My power ratings have this at 17 points. Great points you made about them getting through a very tough part of the schedule, and Lamar Jackson is a little bit banged up. But what I look at is the Jets' schedule. It ranks dead last at 32 out of every single football team here. Dead last on Sagarin. And I'm wondering if that's helping pad those yards per play stats when they're facing teams like Miami a couple times, facing teams. I think they played Cincinnati. I think they played Washington. I can't remember, but either way, that is a bad schedule. And the Ravens, very hard to stop. I hate feeling public here, but this is a big spread for a reason. I think at 14 I would do it, Marco, but not at 14.5. Any final thoughts?
Yeah, you're not going to see it. I don't think you see a 14 because the public, Vegas brought it out over the 14 knowing where the public was going to be. And they've bet Baltimore week in and week out.
But guys like you are going to bring it down to 14, aren't you?
I said if I had to take it, I would take the Jets. I didn't say I was knocking people over to get to the window.
Absolutely, man. Well, let's move on to a game that's another game on the West Coast here. Cleveland Browns versus the Arizona Cardinals. It is now at about plus 2.5. The over-under is 48 here. Man, let's face it, Freddie Kitchens, he lied to us. Not me and you, but he lied to a lot of people because I know you weren't on the Cleveland Browns. Neither was I before the season started. And he pretended to be a good coach. And looking at him and his decisions this year, it's the absolute opposite, in my opinion. Baker Mayfield, though, even though with Kitchens, he should have a field day. I mean, the Cardinals allow the most passing yards per game in the league at 294, yet they played a pretty hard schedule. The only thing the Cardinals can do well is really run the ball if you look at their yards per rush, but they never get to because they're always behind, So, and their running backs have been banged up. So, the Browns, I'm leaning under the 3 here. I could be wrong. I actually was on the Cardinals last week, and I was wrong about that when the Steelers came in and beat them there. So I'm a little nervous about this game. I know that the Browns do have a net 1.0 yards per play advantage on Arizona here. What do you think about this one?
I'm all about the total in this one, and people are going to look and see Arizona back-to-back unders, and they only scored 7 and 17, and they're going to look at this total, 48, and I said, well, that looks like a lot of points, and Cleveland doesn't score a lot of points. Well, I'm going to go back to Arizona's last 2 games. They played the Rams and Steelers, the number 5 and number 6 defenses in the NFL. Cleveland is not. Cleveland is number 18, so they're in the bottom half of the league. And Cleveland's offense going to have a field day, as you mentioned, against a very bad Arizona defense. How bad? 31st out of 32 teams is that Arizona defense. In the last 6 games, everyone but the Steelers has scored 28 points or more against them. The Steelers don't score. That's been their problem all year. They've got no offensive players. You look at the offensive roster Connor's been hurt, Juju's been hurt. Obviously we lost Big Ben, then you're going with Mason Rudolph, and now, we got Duck Hodges, running the offense, and he's undefeated though. He's at 3-0 as a starter. This is a spot where I see both teams late in the season, nothing to play for, like a pickup game outside. Just go up and down the field. Arizona's going to spray the football all over the field. Cleveland, lost in all of the transition here. The suspension to Gilbert is huge for that defense. Mm-hmm. And Arizona has an offense that can exploit this Cleveland defense. And if Arizona's scoring points, that's going to mean Cleveland's going to have to answer, and they'll be going against that 31st ranked defense. I'm projecting 55 or more points in this game. I love the over.
All right. Both teams are going to score here. Cleveland, a little bit of trouble on the defense. Some suspensions, obviously, as you know, have been happening here. No, it's fair. It's fair. The over 48 points here. 49 is kind of a key. If you can get it under 49, I like that. So great points on this one. So not looking to a side. You're right. Is Cleveland completely out of it, or is there a chance they can win out and be in?
Mathematically, they're still in it. Realistically, they're not.
Right,
I just, I put the fork in them. They're not officially, forked, but they're pretty close to it.
That's right, and it's a big travel spot for them. All right. Well, let's get into a game that you know a little bit more. Well, you know about a lot of games, but this is your baby, Marco. The Buffalo Bills versus the Pittsburgh Steelers. And I can tell you're just dying to talk about the Steelers in the last game right there. But the Steelers are laying 2 points here. Over under is 36.5. But I have to apologize to you, Marco. This is a Sunday night game, and if I have the options to take my kids to the Christmas lights rather than watch this game, I might have to oblige here, man. So,
well, they're definitely not going to be lighting up the scoreboard in this one, I can tell you that. The Steeler defense has been absolutely tremendous, and when I was talking about the Arizona game, with Pittsburgh last week, full disclosure, I was on Arizona. I thought it was an absolute horrible spot for the Steelers. going out there. And again, it just absolutely defies me of what Mike Tomlin has done this year with this roster. This is by far his best coaching job since he's been the head coach of the Steelers. And you realize that from day one that he walked through the door, he has never had a losing season as head coach of the Pittsburgh Steelers. Okay, and this is by far his best job. You look at this roster to start the season, and that was with a healthy Ben Roethlisberger. How many names were off that roster? And then as the season went on, take Ben off, take injuries to Connor, take injuries to Juju. In the quarterbacks that he had throwing the football to the list of wide receivers that nobody knew. Just tremendous. They're not scoring any points. Every game is going to be the same type of game. And with that said, there's only one way I'm playing this game. Yes, I'll be rooting for my Pittsburgh Steelers because, believe it or not, from a team that started 0-3, if they win on Sunday against the Buffalo Bills, they will be the number 5 seed if the playoffs ended on Sunday, if they win. Think about that for a moment. They started the season 0-3 and lost their starting quarterback, and they looked horrible in that 0-3 start and where they are today. Now, with that said, the Steelers can't score points. They have scored 23 points last week, was their highest output that they've had in their last 7 games.
Wow.
Okay? All right. 7 of those 23 points last week was on a punt return for a touchdown. Okay? They have to rely on the defense. So where I'm getting at, and we've seen a huge switch in the market to the Steelers. This game was a pick'em, but now the Steelers are a clear-cut favorite. You're seeing them around town. I'm seeing, 1.5s, 2s. I even saw a 2.5 for a brief stint, but 2's the consensus number right now I'm seeing. I jumped all over Buffalo on a teaser, 6-point teaser. I just do not see the Steeler offense against this Buffalo defense getting separation. I think Buffalo will be within a score the entire game. The only way that Buffalo gets blown out in this game is you would have to have them have 2 or 3 interceptions and a couple pick sixes or something like that to give Steelers cheap touchdowns. But if you look at this Buffalo team, they don't turn the football over, Kiev.
Right.
The last 9 games, they've got a total of 4 turnovers. You got a good defense. If you take care of the ball, I'm sorry, you're going to be in the game. And I will have Buffalo hooked up on a ton of teasers on Sunday, and that's how I am playing that. So if Pittsburgh wins by 10 or more and all my teasers go up in flames, you're going to see a very sad-faced Marco jumping up and down in his Ben Roethlisberger. Because they're in the playoffs, but I'm going to have lost a shit ton of money on Sunday.
The bittersweet Marco. How many times have I been there before fading my teams? So I know exactly. But
I am an absolute masochist that even when I bet against my team, I still go to the bar in my Steeler jersey.
There you go.
I'm wearing Big Ben.
There you
and
go.
I'm sitting there rooting for the other team. You want to talk about getting dirty looks, okay? Yeah. Well, what's wrong with this dude?
Yeah. I usually I don't ever take favorites. I know, just cheering while you're wearing the team. It's like a oxymoron in a way, right? So yeah, I've been there before. It's just that when your team's a dog here, and another team's a favorite, you don't always bet that favorite there because you'd have a double loss if they win by like 1 point. Your team loses and you lose your bet. That's a double whammy right there, and you don't want
that. That is definitely. We have a saying, if you got a game at a bad number and then you're trying to get out of it, and there's still a bad number the other way, and there's only one number that the game could land on that could just absolutely kill you both ways. We call that the Polish middle, and it does happen.
Yep. I think I mentioned that before. I absolutely agree with you. The old Polish middle will get you. So, no, fantastic. I love the teaser. Buffalo Bills are going to come in strong after that loss to Baltimore last week. So I think they're going to be pretty buttoned up this game. So I think passing the 3 and passing the 7 is a no-brainer, my man. Love it.
Especially in a total that's only 36.5.
I know. If you're not playing teasers this week with that thing, then why are you even betting the NFL? Is what I gotta say. So I think we might send a few of those teasers out ourselves, my man. Well, do you have any quick games or plays you want to talk about?
I just go back to the Cleveland game. It's a game that I'll tell you flat out, my customers are getting that play. I absolutely love that one. You put that one on the card. You didn't, you told me which ones were breaking down today, and I saw that, and I said, well, you're going to get a treat because I love this over.
Fantastic. Take the over 48. Get it before it gets to 49. What's going on over at Wager Talk this week?
Well, when I'm done with this podcast with you today, I've got to finish preparing for both shows tomorrow. Bet on it. We'll be filming that in studio tomorrow. We've got the bowl packages up. We've got some specials running on that. And just, fun times. We had a couple of weeks ago, Kev, you should have made the trip over. We had a meet and greet at the Westgate, and a lot of alcohol consumed. You should have seen our bar bill. And, anytime Johnny Detroit flies into town, the bar bill is going to be bad. But when you invite, several hundred people to come have free drink with you, and Johnny, it's going to be disastrous. So, but it was a fun time, gave out some swag, got to meet a lot of people, and we're going to plan on doing something probably for next summer similar to that again.
Well, I'll see you there for that one, my man, but I'll see you before that because, basketball's coming on, and we have a lot to talk about for March Madness, my man. So that is awesome. Thank you so much for spending the time, as usual, during this extremely busy time of year, Marco. Really appreciate it. You gave us a ton of insight. Have a fantastic weekend, Marco.
All right. Sorry for running long. I know we ran a little long today, but it wasn't all fluff.
No, it certainly wasn't. You gave me some great ideas. All right, that was Marco D'Angelo. Make sure you follow him on Twitter at Marco in Vegas from Wager Talk. All right, now it is time for some free plays for not just the NFL. We're going to give you a free play for the Army-Navy game. Got to keep that college rolling for you guys. And I like this one because this spread is awfully big for two triple option teams playing each other. If you look back the past 5 years, none of these games have finished over 7 points. Okay? This is a huge rivalry, and you can throw away your power ratings when it comes to the Army-Navy game because both of these schools are motivated. They're going to play out of their minds. It's the only game on in town. Yes, Navy was a fantastic team. They are a bowl team. They're going to be playing Kansas State, but they are also even ranked in the top 25, which is huge. They are ranked 21. Great job for Navy. Their only losses were against tough teams like Memphis, teams like Notre Dame, and that's about it. They rolled through the American Athletic Conference. They did get to avoid UCF, though, and they did get to avoid Cincinnati. So just wanted to throw that out there. They did avoid a couple hard teams. Now, Navy, their yards per play is great, about a 1.2 discrepancy. But Army, they're not that bad. They might have lost a ton of games, was only 5-7, but they were just kind of undisciplined for some reasons, And, got caught at Georgia State, lost by 7, lost to San Jose State, which is an improved team. But what tells me a lot is when they played Air Force, which is a ranked 24th in the nation, they only lost by 4 points because it's an option team facing an option team. They know how to defend each other. They run the triple option. If anybody knows how to stop it, it's the coaches that do it. Okay? So this is going to be a lot closer than the 11 points that it is. So I'm giving this out at Army plus 10.5 or plus 11, whatever you want there. And obviously, if this spread goes drastically down, I could buy back. But this is a 3-star premium play for me. It's going to be a great game. It's one of the games I wish I could go to. I've never been to an Army-Navy game. Still on the bucket list, so I'm hoping to do that. All right, now let's get into our NFL Week 15 free plays. And might as well start right out with what we talked about with Marco, the Baltimore Ravens here. You know, I relooked at this one, and the Jets are so injured. If you look at their injury report, it's longer some of the books I used to read in 5th grade. This team is completely devastated by injury, and a lot of people think that it's a flat spot for Baltimore, but I got to tell you this. If I could predict flat spots exactly, then I would probably not even have to podcast or do anything else but sports bet, because I'd be right on all of them. This is a game where I don't think this is going to have a lot of motivation for the Jets. As a matter of fact, there's some trade rumors that they're going to get rid of Le'Veon Bell in the offseason. I mean, do they want to play him and injure him? You know, I'm not so sure. You know, I look at the Jets, and yeah, the top defense, third, and their rushing defense is so good, but I have to keep looking at the fact that their schedule ranks 32nd in the nation, okay? 32nd. Let's go over some of the teams that they played, okay? They played the Bills the first game, and Bills are pretty good, but then they got the Browns at home. Then they went to the Patriots, and they're good. Then they played a beat-down Eagles team, the Cowboys. Cowboys aren't as good. Then they got to play the Patriots again. Then they got to play the Jaguars, the Dolphins, the Giants, the Redskins, the Raiders, the Bengals, the Dolphins, and now they have to play the Ravens. I'm telling you, this schedule was the easiest in football up to this point. So I'm going to lay the minus 14. It's not going to be a big play. And if I can't get my price at minus 14 at minus 120, then it probably won't be a play. And I haven't played it yet, but I'm looking towards the Ravens right here. Next free play, we have the Chicago Bears versus the Green Bay Packers. Green Bay's laying 4.5, over under is 40.5. So here we are, huge rivalry game. Chicago's fighting to stay alive for playoff contention, and Green Bay is trying to find a first-round bye in the playoffs. That's huge. I think what we're seeing out of Green Bay is that they have a great game plan for every single game. They start out hot, and then they kind of falter off a little bit. It's like when teams adjust, they don't seem to adjust that well. And you saw the Redskins come back last week. The Packers, they're a much better home team than road team. They're a positive 0.6 yards per play at home. Well, in general, counting road and home teams, they're a net negative 0.5. So they are a little dangerous at home, but and that's something that has me a little concerned. But what I'm banking on is the Bears have improved. They're playing like they were last year finally, okay? And it took a long time to do that, but they're starting to run the ball, and that's the Packers' weakness. Mitch is starting to run the ball. Where the hell has this been all year? I've been screaming for him to run the ball, as you know, if you listen to this podcast frequently, okay? So I'm going to go with the desperate team and the 4.5 points here. The Bears are more desperate than the Packers. I'm going to take it. I think Mitch is also going to get some more rushing yards because he finally figured that out. And I'm going to put a 2-star prop on him rushing over 19 yards. I think it's at 17 minus 120. We'll take it at that. Mitch over 17 yards, rushing 2-star premium, and Chicago plus 4.5, 2-star premium play.
Show me the money!
All right, for our last play, we have Jacksonville versus Oakland. Oakland is laying 6.5 points. Over-under is 45.5. Jacksonville's out of playoff contention at 4-9, and now they get rewarded for their terrible play to travel all the way across the country. They deserve it. Oakland's been on a bad run lately, and they played some tougher teams. minus the Jets that first 3 weeks ago, whatever. But either way, they're going to be without Josh Jacobs, and they're still mathematically in this, to believe it or not. They're 6-7, but mathematically they have a chance here. But I also think that Gruden knows how to rally teams, and it's only his second year. It's not like jobs are, being threatened yet by any means. I think Hunter Renfrow has a shot of playing this game. I know Josh Jacobs is out, but Washington's a good running back. He's fine, And so this play is more about Jacksonville really than Oakland. The Jaguars have lost by double digits in each of their last 5 games. The defense, terrible, just absolutely terrible. Their offense is lethargic. I'm not sure if these players even care anymore. The only thing they can do is run the ball from time to time, but that's the best thing the Raiders have is stopping the run, allowing 4.1 yards per rushing attempt. So DJ Chark is not going to play this game, it looks like. Jacksonville also just lost their guard, Brandon Thomas. Their injury report's pretty big. I love the mustache, man. I love Gardner Minshew just as much as anybody, but his coming of age is going to have to wait because this team is not healthy and they're not looking good. It looks like this whole coaching staff is gone this year. Why even try when you're on the road? Take Oakland, -6.5. I gave it out at -6. This is a 2-star premium shared play.
Have you found Jesus yet? No.
I didn't know I was supposed to be looking for him, sir.
It's time for
The Sharp Side of the Force.
The Sharp Side of the Force is brought to you by uwager.eu for a 50% bonus. Please visit uwager. Use the promo code ODDSBREAKERS. Terms and conditions apply. All right. We're only going to do Sharp NFL here because there isn't any bowl games this weekend, and there's really no sharp money on the Army-Navy game as of yet that I can see anyway. No difference. It was like a 4% difference, but we're looking at the Broncos at the Chiefs. There's sharp money on the Broncos. 68% of the tickets are on the Broncos, but 90% of the money's on the Broncos. 22% difference. A little bit of dual action there. We're going to look towards the Dolphins at the Giants. 19% of the bets are, 19% difference between the ticket count and the money. 28% of the tickets are on the Giants, but 47% of the money. Looking down, and the next sharp play is the Falcons from +11.5 down to +11. 51% of the bets are on the Falcons, but 81% of the money. The Niners got really beat up that last game. A little dual action on the Rams. God, this thing opened at +4, and now they're -1 in Dallas. Poor Dallas there. And that's it for sharp money. And, well, for that, then we're going to look at sharp totals in the NFL. And the first one we have is the under in the Buccaneers-Lions game, under 47, a 34% difference. And we're looking at the under in the Eagles versus Redskins, under 40. We have a 29% difference between tickets and money. And the under in the Bills versus Steelers from 37 down to 36.5. What a low number. A 40% difference. So they're still hitting that number, my friends. All right, well, that's the show for today. Sorry, it went a little long. When Marco and I get to talking, it can definitely take a little bit of while. But thanks for listening out there. Really appreciate you guys. If you have any questions, please tweet us at the Odds Breakers. Have a fantastic rest of your week and go get some wins.